Welcome to this webinar organized by the French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore on how COVID-19 and the imposed work from home can change our future of way of working for the better. My name is Lydia Fulton. I'm in charge of the events, committees and communication at the French Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also in charge of the Human Resources Committee. It is a great pleasure for me today to have and to share the screen with Iolanda Meehan, Managing Director at Veldhoen. Thank you very much, Iolanda, to be with us today. Iolanda will give us a 40-minute presentation followed by a Q&A. You can post your question in the chat room during the talk so that she can also answer throughout our presentation. Please keep your mic and the webcam on mute in order to avoid any interferences. Thank you very much, and Iolanda, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Lydia, and good afternoon, everybody. So nice to see many of you joining, even in the time after lunch, when normally we get a little bit tired. So as Lydia mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about one specific aspect that some of us have sort of faced more since the situation with COVID-19 has sort of confined us to our homes, and that is how to manage distributed teams. Few things, we will share the presentation afterwards, so Lydia will forward it to everybody, so there is no need for you to sort of take notes of the slides. You'll have absolutely all the slides as I'm showing them. And also, like Lydia mentioned, try to keep it interactive. I will ask a time question, so I will strongly encouraging you to comment in the chat, and I will keep an eye on the chat, and we'll have some questions towards the end too. Maybe just a few words about Veldhoen. We are a company that have spent the last few decades on advising customers to embrace activity-based working. So you'll be asking like, okay, activity-based working, what does that have to do anything with distributed teams? But not surprisingly, when you're looking at activity-based working, physical space is one element, IT tools is an element, but actually the biggest change and the biggest challenge we have with a lot of our customers, and they have it for themselves, is to change the mindset and the behavior of teams to work in a more flexible way. And hence, we've been a bit fortunate to have this opportunity to learn over decades of what companies are struggling with when they are trying to move and work in a more distributed way. And hopefully we can then help you now at the moment with sharing the information that we've gathered. I would like to start with one quote that I saw the other day on Twitter from a management professor, Italian, Petriglieri. And I thought that this quote is quite good. It sort of captures what we're going through. He was saying that it's easier being in each other's presence or in each other's absence than in the constant presence of each other's absence. And what we're doing now, you know, all of us working remotely from our homes and trying to stay connected without necessarily being physically present there, it is not an easy thing, not an easy task to accomplish. So it does raise quite a lot of questions and challenges that people face. So what we'll cover today, we'll cover first a bit of a definition in our view of what a distributed team means. Then we'll look into some challenges that we have identified, I was telling you, that are more often met by a lot of teams. And then we will also look at two exercises that hopefully you can take with you to help you also bring some of these learnings from this period into the future, into that new normal, whatever that new normal will look like. To be very honest, I don't think there is one person that has the answers to everything. So I will do my best to share with you what we've learned so far from our customers and our colleagues which are working in this way. But I'm sure that there will be a lot of uncovered territory, and you can also use this opportunity to learn something about yourself and your teams too. Most of the challenges we hear about are around, okay, how do I know that my team members are working if I can't see them? How do I find them? Like, okay, we have Zoom and WhatsApp and all of that, but sometimes they don't respond. How do I make sure that I find them? How do I give them the flexibility, my team, the flexibility to work remotely, while at the same time, we still want to deliver results. We are responsible for delivering results. One question that we also get quite a lot of times is, how do I make sure we stay connected? But like truly connected. Of course, we connect now all the time on meetings and updates, and everything happens online, and we're all encouraged to have the video on so that we see each other. But how do we really stay connected as human to human? And I'm sure you've seen already some very creative ideas on, virtual wine at 5 p.m., virtual coffee in the morning, and all of this, which are, I think, wonderful attempts of teams to stay connected at a human level too. So if you look at distributed teams, there are loads and loads of topics we could talk about. But for the purpose of today, I'll focus on 3, which I think are the ones that are, if you master this and if you have them in your team and you as a leader or as a manager or as a peer in the group could support the rest of the team to develop this very strongly. Yes, the rest are important and everything is interconnected, but these, I think, form the basis. And these 3 are trust, big words. How do we establish and maintain clarity? And how do we manage each other and ourselves based on outcomes? So we'll just go a bit in depth into these 3 topics now. Comment from somebody? Okay. Maybe just to share what is a distributed team in our understanding. Normally, so that's before COVID-19, that's before all of us were sort of, asked to work from home and sort of not getting to the office. Most of us were working in an office relatively in the proximity of the leader, or if you're the leader, you'd have most of the time the team around you, generally. I know maybe some people will be based in another country, and that's why you have few people outside of the gray box, which represents the office. And maybe some people were working a bit more remotely or on a different floor, but generally most of us were working close to each other and taking visual cues from each other and around the leader. Now we are in this scenario where if the box in the middle is the office, most of us are outside of the office, maybe 1 or 2 or 3, depending if they are a critical function or not, would be still in the office, but most of us are working totally dispersed, and the leaders too, right? So the leaders are not in the proximity of the teams anymore. And distributed teams, it's something that we think will happen, especially after people go back to a new normal, where most probably we'll see much more of this. So a combination of people working from the office, some choosing to be closer to the leader, like you see the red group, maybe close to the leader there. Some maybe choosing to still work quite flexibly in the office too, and some working outside of the office. And this model, a blended model, which we call a distributed team, is very likely going to be more the new normal for a lot of organizations. Again, most probably not for all, but we see that more teams would move into that direction. So the big difference then is when you're not close to your team members at all times, you might have these experiences. One is that you're not longer incidentally aware of what your team or team members are up to, or the work that they are doing, or the knowledge that they are sharing, or if they are completing something or not. Second is that you might lose the feeling that you are part of a team. And I think quite a lot of managers, they are now starting to challenge their own roles. Like, what role do I play as a manager? Because if I'm not controlling and if I'm not, sort of there all the time to answer any sort of questions or address maybe delays, what is really my role as a manager in the future and as a leader in the future? And there might be other differences that people experience when they are not physically close to the rest of the team. And that's where we typically see we created this continuum, which is the higher the distance in time and space becomes, the more the teams are flexible, right? So you have some teams in this world that even before COVID-19 were working fully virtually. Now it's all of us, but some of them were doing that before. So they've got a high distance and high time difference between them. Then on the other end of the spectrum is maybe a bit more of a traditional setup. We already talked about it, where we have little difference in space between us, little distance, and also little distance in time. We're pretty much located in the same office on the same time zone, so not big delays there. Distributed teams are somewhere on the continuum, a bit closer to higher distance and higher time difference. Because, as I said, teams might end up working from the office, from home, or a blended model. So maybe just to have a quick question and to get you guys to put some things on chat is, now you've been experiencing this, time and space, higher distance between you and your teams. What positive difference, what positive impact did this make so far? So I know that there are negative ones, but for the purpose of this first question, could you maybe post some chats as to what positive differences did you see by being a bit further away from the team? Now it's time to get chatting. Any positives? Yeah, better focus. Yeah, I love that from Christoph. More time to reflect, actually having time to breathe, to sort of think about it before blurting out a response. Yeah, lovely. Flexibility, fully recognize that. More autonomous, I love that from Emmanuel. Yes, we are feeling more empowered and somehow more self-managed. Freedom, nice. Yeah, so very nice to see that there are quite a lot of positives that we experience. Most of the time it's about our sense of freedom. We can actually take a bit control back. We try something new, we are taking time to reflect. Maybe we can schedule some stuff more in our agendas. We are a bit more in control of that, as opposed to, people continuously coming over and wanting us to be part of different meetings and different gatherings and so on. So yeah, nice to see the positives. Nice, Nicola. Yeah, I think that confidence, so Nicola says confidence is distributed. Yes, confidence, decision making. We end up with a more of a distributed leadership model, if you want, because we are also creating through that an environment where people feel more autonomous, they take a bit more responsibility, and they also, because I think we're sort of leveling the field, most of the team members, their voices are heard better. They are a bit more encouraged and free to express how they really feel, to come up with that idea that they had for a while, but they were not sure if the boss will turn it down or not. Yeah, very nice. Okay, let's try to now do the other exercise, right? So what have you seen as challenges? Because obviously, not seeing the team all the time and not being in each other's proximity, for sure it has brought some challenges too. So again, maybe you could do a similar exercise, try to chat, add your comments as to what you've seen as challenges in this time. So Amin says it's empowering and making people accountable. Is that as a challenge? So maybe a challenge on how to make people accountable. Yeah, Tilak, indeed. Keeping a united team is a challenge in these times. Much easier for all of us to feel united, we're in each other's proximity. Yeah, and I can fully relate to that. Virtual meetings, one after the other. This goes a little bit against the control that we're gaining on one time, and how much in control of our calendar we become. And are we really recognizing the fact that we do need the break between all these meetings back to back? And hard to keep everyone focused on same goals. Yes. And Melvin says it's also difficult to disconnect from work. It is so true, especially if you have the feeling that you need to be there, whether you're the leader because your team might need you or they might have questions, or if you're not the leader, that the leader or the manager might call upon you at unexpected times and you need to have the answer. The switching off becomes a challenge, and we don't have that pattern anymore, going to the office, preparing for work and coming back from the office, which is like winding down. And then I've seen work-life balance in both situations, positive and negative. On one side, we can maybe make time for some things at home. On the other side, yeah, are we able to really protect that precious time with the family? So very nice to see. Yeah, and social interactions. Okay, thank you so much for being so open about the challenges that you've seen and experiences so far. We'll try to tackle some of them. So we'll talk about 3 challenges in the next slides. With the increased pressure of teams to work in this way, in a distributed way, we typically see challenges in 3 areas, more or less 3 groups, right? It's a team connection. I think some of you have said, how do I stay connected with the team? I'm feeling a bit socially disconnected. You know, I miss them in a way. Team coordination, how do I make sure things get done? Who's working on what projects are they running on? How do I make sure that everybody is aligned to something clear and we're all driving in the same direction? And one topic that maybe wasn't very clearly stated yet, but it's knowledge sharing. How do we share knowledge? In the past, we were maybe sharing knowledge ad hoc by being, you know, just there by osmosis. Somebody says something and then the rest of us hear. But now, how do you make sure that knowledge that is gained by one is shared with the rest? So 3 topics we'll discuss. All of these could be supported and tackled and mitigated if you have these 3 elements in your team: building trust, creating clarity, and focusing on outcomes. So let's start a little bit with the first one. So trust helps you overcome the challenge of distance. Yeah. Which is like, how do I stay connected when time and space are sort of all of a sudden big between us? So trust helps with that. Clarity overcomes the challenge of complexity, especially if the work for most of us knowledge workers is complex. Clarity helps with that and helps to clarify things when people are not sitting next to each other. And outcome focus overcomes the challenge of not seeing each other. So let's see how all of this could look like. Trust, we'll start with trust. Trust is a big word, right? There is one definition of trust, which I've included here, which I like. It comes from the book of Brené Brown. I don't know if you guys know her. She's a fantastic researcher in vulnerability and guilt. And the flip side of it, it's trust. And she's basically defining trust as having positive expectations about somebody else's action, even though you're quite vulnerable to the other's action. Yeah, so it's really taking that leap of faith. I'm sure there are many, many other definitions of trust. So quick exercise, how do you define trust? What does trust mean to you in your teams? Again, maybe like a very quick chat to see how you guys think of trust. Inner state. Delegation, yeah, fulfilling promises over time, over and over and over again. That's so correct, Alex, yes. Other definitions of trust that you sort of can relate to? I will give you a bit of a tip. If you do check the book of Brené Brown or her website called Dare to Lead, you'll have these details in the presentation. You'll see that she's splitting trust in 7 elements, and she has a nice sort of shortening for it. She calls braving. And I think that it's worthwhile going a little bit into the anatomy of trust and see also why sometimes you feel like your trust has been broken, or maybe you have broken somebody's trust. It's much easier to discuss if you've got those elements put together. Let's move on. We'll talk about why is trust naturally harder with distance. And this is where we go a little bit, I wouldn't say into the science, but a bit into the reality of our brain. In face-to-face interactions, we quickly draw conclusions whether somebody is trustworthy or not, based on what we actually observe. So this impression is formed based on a variety of information that we pick up, almost non-realizing that we're doing it unconsciously. And then we draw a conclusion about somebody, whether they can be trusted or not. And then we react to that based on this image that we have created. What is also interesting with trust, it's something that accumulates over time. You don't gain somebody's trust in one go, right? It's something that takes time to build. And it takes a long time to build. The downside is that a lot of times trust can be broken with one single action. So a lot of effort gets put into building trust over time, but it's also quite easy to demolish the trust. And Also, people think that trust normally gets broken also with one thing, but the reality is that also it can get eroded over time, especially if it is not constantly reinforced. So every little instance, we call it a micro opportunity to build trust that we typically have in the office when we see each other, adds up to our overall trust in a person. So establishing trust, therefore, becomes a bit more difficult when we don't see each other all the time. Like, yes, we are told and asked and encouraged, have the video on. We can, sort of use the video to pick up some cues that normally we would just naturally absorb. But you do miss a bit opportunities, micro opportunities to build the trust and to maintain the trust over time. So what happens is when you don't have that trust continuously nurtured, unfortunately, our brain tends to have this, make them worst assumptions when we don't see or when we don't get this trust reinforced. So it starts creating a bit its own picture when faced with uncertainty. And we then pay a bit more attention to the people that are in front of us or are visible versus the ones that we don't see so much. And the reason for which I'm focusing a little bit on the trust and also seeing people versus not seeing them so much is that, especially when we'll go back to the office and maybe we will work in a more distributed way, there might be people that are next to you that you'll see and you'll, sort of rebuild and strengthen the trust naturally because they're in the same room or in the same space with you. But we need to also be very aware of the fact that people might join in virtually in the future while some are together, and need to be very aware that we're not allocating different levels of trust to the ones that are close to us versus the ones that are somewhere virtually. It's just a trick that our brain plays on us. So tips to build trust. It takes time, again, and I'm sure that most of you have already built trust with your teams when face-to-face, but these are some tips that maybe help when you don't see each other face-to-face, right? Always assume the positive intent. So if you don't hear from somebody, if they haven't delivered that report, if they haven't picked up that email, if they, whatever, try to make the positive assumption, make the generous assumption. Maybe something happened. Make that assumption first before jumping to the conclusion of, okay, yeah, they're again not delivering, or for sure they're going to be late and so on. And then check with them. What's the story? Invest time as much as possible in face-to-face. Not only face-to-face in a group, but also face-to-face one-on-one, virtually, and later on, when possible, through face-to-face. Also preserve current ways of celebrating a team. If you had before birthday parties that you were always celebrating together in the office, why not do the same now virtually? And why not do the same once you're back to the office, but some colleagues might choose to be present virtually? Make yourself as a leader, as a manager, as a team member specific at certain times, so people always know, okay, if I need him or her, I'll find them there. And that builds trust on the fact that you are also reliable and accountable and visible. Obviously, honor your agreements and check in when you're expected to check in. And I think the last one also links a little bit to the next topic, which is around clarity. Agree on how are you going to see each other, how often, which medias will you use? Is it WhatsApp? Is it Teams? Is it Zoom? What is it? So people feel that they are part of the discussion and they are not missing out on, oh, they are using another tool and I'm not on the platform. Or that recently happened, by the way, to me with a member of our teams who's based in Shanghai. And, we were having all these wonderful conversations on WhatsApp about team and babies and kids and, like everything, going there. And she felt so left out because actually in China, they don't access WhatsApp so well. So as a consequence, like it was great that she brought it up. But then as a consequence, we now are all embracing as much as possible WeChat, which is a challenge for the rest of us, of course, because we haven't necessarily used it before. But it also starts making her feel more inclusive and included. And it was never intention to leave her out. It was just not realizing that one platform we had chosen is not easily accessible by others. So that's around trust. We'll move to clarity, unless there are major questions to take now, but maybe we'll keep them for later so we can cover all three topics if that's okay with you. We'll move to clarity. The thing with clarity, it's a feeling, it's not a thing, right? When the world becomes a bit too complex to manage, I think a lot of team members and a lot of people sort of reach out to each other or reach out to the leader and the manager for some clarity. And we need to realize that the leaders and the managers play a big role in setting that clarity for the team. There is a fine line, though, as to how much is too much clarity versus it's not enough. I think that what is quite important is that it's making it clear that when turning up to work, what is the contribution and why that contribution of somebody is important? How does that project link to something that is important for the organization? How does that activity that they're expected to do link to something that is positively impacting the business? So I would, as a leader, as a manager, focus a lot on identifying the why. Why is this project important? Why is this work important? And empowering then the team to connect themselves to that why and trusting them to make the best decision. So if we look at this graph of clarity, I'm sure you all had in your life at a certain stage the experience of micromanaging, either doing it or being micromanaged, right? So when it's too much clarity, when you're telling people exactly what they have to do, what they have to do step by step, it becomes, it destroys trust and it creates a lot of disengagement. On the other side, if there is not enough clarity, I think one of you already put the comment in the chat, was like, yeah, okay, what are people working on? Are we misaligning roles? Do we duplicate work, or maybe the work doesn't get done because people are not very clear who's playing what role? So it's a fine line as to what is just right clarity. But like I said already, it's around goals and efforts, building trust, and also using the clarity as an opportunity to build people's competence and talents and strengths, and getting people a little bit, stretched in the process too, as you're offering clarity regarding a project. We have created a BDS map, which is just a short visual to help. Typically, the red boxes, or the darker red, are the ones where a lot of managers will focus on, okay? What's the scope of the project? If you're really good at offering clarity, what's the scope of the project? Roles and responsibilities? What are we expected to get out of this? What are resources available, money, time, or whatever? And some of the good managers would also say, okay, what is my role in it, and how would I make myself available to support? What we do less when it comes to project work, especially in distributed teams, is we forget or not do enough of the purpose and the role, your own role as a leader. So I think that's quite a nice opportunity when you are defining clarity, when you're pursuing clarity, is to realize that the development opportunities for a team member, helping them understand how that fits into the bigger project, but also how he leverages his or her strengths, or maybe it helps them sort of develop in areas that need to be developed, as well as your own, acknowledging your own role as a leader in there. What is the learning opportunity for you? What strengths do you think you bring to that project? What development areas maybe you have that you want to contribute? That becomes a great opportunity for coaching, for delegating, while setting up clarity for a project. So I would strongly encourage you, if you can, not only to focus on the two red boxes, though they are extremely important to secure clarity, but try to migrate some of the conversations with your teams when you're discussing about a project or a new piece of work or anything that needs to be delivered around the pinker areas too, the lighter pink. Now, the last topic that we'll talk about is where clarity and trust somehow get together. Yeah, so if you have clarity about the roles and responsibilities and the development opportunities, and at the same time you trust people that they are able to do, something wonderful happens. All of a sudden, teams that were maybe in the past not easily relying on results or managing by outcomes, but they were more relying on managing by presence or trust by presence, are shifting in being able to be outcome focused. So it's nice to see that even though when the team is distributed, access to visual cues is diminishing, our reading of what's going on, we might feel a little bit disconnected. And even though sometimes the gut feel might be like, okay, if I don't really see them working, then most probably they're not working. Again, that's the mind playing a trick. It's not you being maleficent in any way or a non-trusting person. It can highlight for us some problems and hopefully help us discover some positives. Actually, the team member that you don't get to see that often might be a very high performer, but maybe he or she needs different time to focus on things. Maybe they are, like highly introvert and they need more time to be able to go deeper into the topic, but they will come up also with a way better solution than, if they were just part of a meeting and keeping on blurting things out. Also, what we define by work, it's a bit narrow, or in our own mind, maybe for me, work is like, okay, writing loads of reports, so I expect that you will do the same. But work for others could be, they get inspiration from the outside world. They read and they process and they connect dots in an unexpected way. So it is nice to also engage in these conversations to try to find out why we're sometimes jumping to the conclusion somebody is not doing their job as we think it should be done. But of course, we sometimes develop anxiety over this hypothesis because we assume, oh, our people are not working, so something, or they're not aligned, so I need to do something. And that could spiral. So I think it's quite important that we realize the importance of trust and clarity to try to drive as much as possible this focus on outcomes. And then all of these long hours that we expect people to spend in the office just to have credibility that they're working, hopefully disappear. All of this assumption that unless you're behind a computer, you're not really working, hopefully that disappears. And there will be strengths for us to take with us post-COVID-19. So I've added here a slide, very easy with focusing on outcomes. I'm sure you know about the don'ts. But I would encourage you later on, if you have some time, to go through the do's and how to manage a team on outcomes. What to me is always puzzling when we work with a customer is that they say, yeah, but in our team, we cannot manage by outcomes. We can only manage, people because they put in the time. And I assume that if they put in the time and I see them struggling with it and they are doing great work. But I would challenge almost every single organization because, for example, we've got sales teams. Whatever business we're in, most of us, we've got sales teams. And sales teams are typically managed by outcomes. And what is quite fascinating, sales teams, most of them, they are all the time out of the office or encouraged not to be seen too often in the office, because then that shows that they will spend more time with the customers or with the opportunities out there. So we have trust towards the sales and we can manage them by outcomes. Somehow we're struggling to use that towards finance and HR and marketing. And so that's a little bit puzzling. But maybe if we can think of that and identify that and use it to the rest of the teams and, us being part of those teams, we can do a better job at focusing on outcomes. I've got the next section, which is very short because the next section is meant more like some exercises that I thought might be helpful for you to take forward with you. But I'll explain a little bit how the exercises are meant to work. I would say the first step is to try to get comfortable in the situation that you're in now. And look at every single scenario that you're struggling with and try to put it through this lens of these three elements, right? Trust, clarity, and outcomes focus. I've included here an example. A team member has been noticeably hard to find. You need to be able to coordinate with him or her this week, checking on some important work. What do you do? The first column is meant to be like, okay, what stands out for you in this scenario when it comes to trust? You have to basically have that positive intent, that generous assumption that I was telling you about. Is difficult in moments when you don't, you can't connect to the person, but it's necessary. So with the first opportunity, maybe when you have to connect with the person, to ask what has happened, what really played in the background, and not necessarily jump to the conclusion that they don't want to be found or they are disappearing on you. Second one is use the prism of clarity. Okay, maybe do they know very clearly what the expectations are? Maybe you should make them a bit more clear or more concrete, or remember that continuum on clarity that we talked about. Maybe you've gone too much on the left, which is less clarity, and you need to move a little bit more on the right to be more precise about the expectations. So try to check that. And then I would also use a check on outcomes focus. Are they meeting their outcomes? Because if you don't see them, but they're delivering fantastic work, and it comes to you at a time when they're supposed to come to you and in the format and in whatever your deliverable and outcome was, do you really need to have a problem with that? and maybe also reflect how is that, the outcome that they give you, is that helping you deliver your own outcomes, then maybe there is no issue. If not, then of course you will need to have a conversation around it. So this I find a very useful exercise to do for any scenario. I've just put here one scenario. I'm sure you would have other scenarios that you can run this exercise through, but try to run it for yourselves. What is playing and what you could do to address that. And the more you do this, the better and easier it becomes. And then it becomes like your second nature, on pretty much everything. And I think that the positive side into everything that is happening to us now is the fact that we've got now the time to maybe strengthen some of these skills. I'm sure a lot of you have them, but strengthen them so that at the moment when we are not confined to our homes, we can continue to apply them to our teams. Because I think they will be beneficial irrespective of whether we work distributed or not in the future. So that's one exercise. The other exercise that I've included in here, again, is think about what actions you can start now for yourself and your team to strengthen trust, clarity, and be more outcomes focused. And the last part, which is, I think, quite important, is which of them do you plan to continue to take with you? I can't imagine that there is no team in whatever new world and new world of work we're talking about and the new normal that wouldn't benefit of trust, or wouldn't benefit of increased clarity, or wouldn't benefit of being measured and held responsible more for outcomes. But it's up to you to decide which of the actions you're taking now and which of them can be carried forward. And maybe you need somebody's help to do that, whether that could be one of your peers, the rest of your team, your manager, and yeah, just I strongly encourage you to go through this exercise if you can. Now, these are the 40 minutes. I'm not too bad. I'm happy that I'm okay on time. I was not sure if I won't have too many slides and too much talking, because I want to make sure that I give you guys also the opportunity to ask questions. So if you don't mind in your chat, just sharing what's your biggest insight so far over these last minutes. Have you taken an insight that you think, oh yeah, that would be good for me to consider? Is there any action that comes to your mind? It would be wonderful if you could actually share it with the rest. When we're normally meeting face to face, you have these great ideas and you get to share them. The whole room benefits of them. So maybe we can do a bit of that. And of course, if you have any questions, what questions would you have or that you would want to have addressed? So I will open the chat now and try to see what comes through. Yeah, Melvin says trust is important as the foundation. Yeah, and you know what, Melvin? Trust is a big word. And if you ask people if they've ever broken somebody's trust or if ever their trust has been broken, everybody says yes. So statistically, it's 100% that we've sometimes or at a moment in time in work or in private life or whatever, got our trust broken by somebody, or that we did that to somebody. So it's a big topic, but it is the foundation, you're right. Using virtual technology should not make us less human. Yes, Christoph, fully agree. I think if anything, to me, this is personal opinion, right? So don't put it as an expert on that at all. But to me, I think it's only made it very clear that technology is a tool for us, and it's a great tool because it's helping us stay connected to each other, and it's helping us, sort of have these conversations without technology we would not be able to have. But I think it's also making very, very clear for everybody that it can be a partner to us, maybe not a threat, because technology cannot necessarily take over that face-to-face human connection and that energy exchange that happens when people are in the same room. And I agree, using technology shouldn't make us less human. I've seen some fantastic examples of people trying to, if nothing, I think a lot of teams have become a bit more human to each other, because you have the kids in the background, there is the pet on the lap, there is, the coffee or the noise or whatever. And yeah, it has helped, I think, quite a lot of people to get rid of the armor that we typically wear when we go to the office. So yeah, I agree.
Yolanda, there is as well another question that has been posted before.
Okay.
You can see it. What exactly is the role of the leadership in the future? What position managers and leaders must do to move from command and control to complete empowerment and accountability?
Yeah. So no, nice question. Was it? Yeah, I see now. Yeah. I think that if leaders are taking this opportunity now to do exactly that, to move away from control and command, because you can't, there is just not possible to command and control at the moment. I know some people have tried, they're calling their people every half an hour to see if they're in the office or at, not in the office, like behind a computer, or asking them to call in to confirm, but that can't last. It's just not, it's crazy, right? So command and control is something that leaders will need to move away from. It's much more around coaching and development and facilitation and being almost like a conduit for knowledge exchange. And I think this has been also a bit of a realization for a lot of leaders, that the leader doesn't have all the answers. Like none of the leaders of the world at the moment have all the answers. Nobody holds the answers to everything. And hopefully the leaders are realizing it in teams too, that they can leverage so much more and they can be so much stronger as a team if knowledge, decisions, leadership is distributed among the team. And I'm a strong believer that if you have the connections between the team members very, very strong, the leader being one of them, not the only one that everybody is connected to, you're having a much stronger, agile, resilient, connected team that can deal with whatever it's thrown at it, whether that's a virus or the financial disruption or anything, because they are so well connected as humans. So I strongly believe that leadership will change and is changing. And if you can take the advantage of this, whatever, we have another 6 weeks of this experiment to learn some of these skills or strengthen them, that's fantastic.
I like very much the comment from Christoph as well. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes. Oh, Christoph, I love that. That's exactly what I said in the first week. I'm like, why do we call social distancing? Because we're not like, it's not like all of a sudden we're cutting all our social ties. But I think that they were just trying to find, obviously, yeah, I agree. It's about physical distancing. I love that question. Yes, I think it should have been called physical distancing. I think now in Europe they came up with a concept or a name for it, which is like the 1.5 meter society or something like that. So that you need to keep distance for 6 feet or 1.5 meter. So here we go. Other questions that you guys have, or reflections, or was this useful? Would you want to have more examples or exercises? Anything that we can make this sort of as meaningful to you as possible. I've just put there my interactive exercises. Yes, I know. Thanks, Christoph, for raising this. I think we can potentially look into a format where we have Zoom or another tool that can allow us to actually do much more exercises. There have been some decisions on Zoom that it's not necessarily but we'll try. So I'm happy to include some interactive exercises. Of course, you can run them interactively with your teams. So once you have the slides and so on, maybe you can find a way of doing them interactively with your teams. Managers and leaders. Yeah. So Amin is asking, managers and leaders might manage their own expectations. What advice you give them? I would wonder if those expectations are realistic. If they have the same value as before. I would encourage leaders and managers to try to reassess the priorities for themselves too. They're in this as humans too, right? Like they are facing the same limitations and restrictions and so on as everybody else. So I would go through the exercise of assessing what is really important to them, both at work and in the rest of the life, and maybe revisit those expectations in line of that. It is a bit of a discovery exercise to do, and I know that a lot of leaders and managers feel like they need to be, on top of it all and in control and really have the answers and know exactly the direction, and they are under pressure from the upper layers too, right? But this is not something that is only happening to a certain layer in the society. This is something that is happening to all of us. So leaders and managers have, I think, the right, like everybody else, to take time to reprioritize for themselves and to reframe the expectations. And sometimes once you, I wouldn't say lower, once you change the expectations, because it's not about less standards or lower standards. Once you change the expectations, the conversations that you have with your team also change big time, and you are able to encourage and bring in ideas of others much more, and that makes your life as a leader much easier. But yeah, discovery, self-awareness, a journey basically. I don't think we're ever there. With the backdrop of long-drawn COVID that may deal to an eventual unavoidable retrenchment, how can trust be rebuilt in an organization? Yeah, so talking about the Maslow pyramid of needs, sense of security being, of course, one of the fundamental levels, and how to rebuild remotely. I think the life before COVID gave us also some examples of companies that isolated at the time were going through very tough times, whether there was a crisis in their sector or, and the difference that that was very recognized and appreciated by everybody is how those companies dealt with the tough time. Those companies that were communicating very openly to their employees what's going on, the ones that are very open and honest about, what they do, whatever it's possible, but some measures might need to be taken, were the ones that actually ended up having, yes, employees that had to leave, but they became big fans and supporters of that brand for a longer period of time. And those employees eventually ended up in other roles, and sort of they created a bit like an advocate for that particular organization. What I've seen a lot of companies doing now successfully, they have a discussion openly with the employees saying, okay, guys, this is the situation. It doesn't look rosy. We'll need to do some cost cutting. We as management, we're taking this and this and this and these measures, which puts you as a manager in the same bucket as everybody else. It's not like I'm continuing to pay myself the $2 million bonus or the 2,000 or whatever, while everybody else gets retrenched, right? So it needs to be equitable. But what can you do? Like a lot of companies are having the decision, should people lower the amount of time that they're working for so that more jobs are being saved, or you keep fewer people that are working full time, but then you're losing more jobs. So I think the key to this is just being open about it and having an honest conversation, as honest as possible. People know that the situation is not easy for anybody. I mean, they know, but I think it makes a huge difference on how they are being treated, and are they considered in the whole equation, or are they just discarded as assets?
Sorry, Iolanda, I've just posted a question for you.
Okay, after COVID-19, how do you see the future of work? Organizations which were not open to remote working, will they have to change their policy? Good question. I think, well, you always have outliers. So I think some companies will try to go back as much as possible to the old way of working and insist that it's all normal. We just stay far away from each other. We all wear masks and be done. Okay. That's one way. I can imagine a lot of organizations will financially need to take different measures. They will need to reconsider their footprint of the buildings. Do we need such big buildings? Because look, we're all able to still continue to do our work while the offices are staying empty. So I could imagine that real estate teams will start thinking of reducing some of the footprint in view of having a much more flexible population. Some, as I said, some working from home, some working from customer locations, some sharing more things in the office. I only hope that people are going to look at it also with the opportunity that this gives. So yes, cost saving, great. Real estate saving, great. Big costs. So people will be happy to take that, but that they are also focusing some of the savings into making sure that the people that are going to work more agile, more flexibly, are well supported. Like we're all a little bit caught off guard with our makeshift offices at home, right? With the craze running for desks and chairs and the back pains and all of that, but also like the mental well-being of remote employees will need to be taken into consideration. And I hope that companies are potentially rerouting some of the savings, let's say, or whatever cost savings from real estate to invest them back into the people, so that employees will have the same experience whether I work digitally from home sometimes or from the office. And I'm well supported in both situations. Yeah. And about the HR policies, I do think more and more companies will, they were having a policy before. Quite a lot of companies had it on paper, but many times it was something that, at the manager's agreement, if the manager said, okay, then you could work from home. I've seen HR policies that are allowing people in the past to work 1 day a month from home. Okay, you have to wonder, why do you want to limit it to 1 day, but sure. There was a study done, by the way, there was years back before COVID-19 in the US, so it's a bit US-centric, but that study was showing that when people work remotely, if they work remotely 100% of the time, they feel disconnected from the rest of the teams that are not working remotely. So 100% is not the solution unless you're truly a virtual team, right? So they exist. But in order for people to be as productive as working from home or another location as from the office, they need to spend about 2 days a week at least working from home. So it becomes a bit of a habit, and you develop your own, sort of little habit, little perks and nudges and so on that make you run the day productively. And then that combination works very well. I can imagine people will go to the office for a totally different reason in the future. Not the immediate future, but a bit the longer future. Most probably it will be to connect with the brand, to connect with the other humans, to have brainstorming sessions and exchanges that are possible virtually, but they are way, the ad hoc interactions are not so easy to do virtually yet. But I could imagine that they will also make choices to not go to the office in some days or at some times because they actually don't need to at that moment. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I don't know if there is any other question.
Yes. Yeah, I think that there will be more smaller offices, but I think they will be better equipped to actually support our needs. Going back to what our company does, which is activity-based working, when we're in the office, we're doing quite a lot of activities, but most of the offices are not supporting a lot of those activities well. They're only supporting whatever, doing some work at a desk. But I'm hoping that they will be better equipped to support our activities as knowledge workers. Any other questions or remarks?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, as well. Thank you so much for your participation. And I really appreciated a lot the interaction. I know it's not as good as it could have been, Christoph, so I'll take that in mind for the next exercises. And Lydia will share with all of you the presentation. Don't hesitate to reach out if you want to have more exercises. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Iolanda. I found it on my side very interactive, actually, and useful presentation with some tools and view. So thank you for sharing those. Thank you all for attending. I will share with you the presentation and the video recording for your reference. Also, please don't hesitate to check our website for the upcoming webinar. We have another one on human resources related topic next week, which is called Step into Your Courage in the Face of Complexity and Change. And please have a look at others because there are quite a few coming up. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon and stay safe. And Iolanda, a big thank you again, and happy to share the screen anytime soon again.
Thanks. My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.